Here on saberduelgaming, we have already done retro reviews of Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2 and Super Mario Bros. 3. But what about Super Mario Bros. 4? Hello there, welcome to saberduelgaming, where we always take the high ground, and welcome to our retro review of Super Mario World. So yes, despite the fact that here in the Western world we have never seen a Super Mario Bros. 4, Super Mario World was released in Japan as Super Mario Bros. 4, so it is effectively the direct sequel to those first 3 games. However, in my opinion, it's also the first time Mario ever actually got a direct sequel. But why do I say this? Well, for a very good reason, it being the truth, really. You see, when Super Mario Bros. Was released, it was such a huge success that Nintendo wanted to get a sequel out as soon as possible. For the Japanese audiences, they released what would become known as the Lost Levels as Super Mario Bros. 2, but that's not really a sequel so much as it is an expansion, really. And here in the West, we got what we know as Super Mario Bros. 2, but that's not even actually a Mario game. It certainly wasn't designed as one. They just put those characters in, so I find it hard to really consider that a true sequel. We did eventually get Super Mario Bros. 3, but that game was so much ahead of the original Super Mario Bros., taking some slight elements of Super Mario Bros. 2, that it doesn't really feel like a sequel so much as an entire new take on the Super Mario concept. But Super Mario World feels like a true sequel to Super Mario Bros. 3. It took aspects such as the very popular maps that show the worlds you're on and took it to the, pardon the pun, next level. Instead of it being one map per world, in Super Mario World, it's all one island. Yes, you still have to get past a end of world boss to be able to move on to the next part, but you can actually see the whole island on one big map and move back and forth between the levels, exploring it as if this is a real place, which was genuinely a fantastic move by Nintendo. It kept aspects such as Mario being able to fly, but did make minor tweaks, instead giving him a cape, because apparently the raccoon tail and ears just didn't scream flyability for some reason. I never understood why they screamed that in the first place. The game continues other trends from Super Mario Bros. 3. Not every single level goes left to right. Some go up and down. Some see you going through warps and other different aspects. On some levels, the camera moves along automatically, and you can get killed if you don't keep up, again as it did in Super Mario Bros. 3. There's a very clear intention to take all the best things from Super Mario Bros. 3 and then take it to, again, the next level. I've got to try and think of a different pun to use. The graphical appearance of Mario did change slightly in this one. Obviously, this was the first time we were going to see Mario in 16-bit. For those that would later get to know Super Mario Bros. 3 through its time in Super Mario All-Stars, this may be a little jarring because he just doesn't quite look the same. I don't know why. There's just something about the feel, the shape of him that just doesn't quite sit the same way. But it certainly doesn't mean one is good or bad, they're just slightly different. We're treated as well to a new location here. We mentioned before about how the map is all one island, and this time we are not in the Mushroom Kingdom. We are actually in Dinosaur Island, and you know where we're going with this. Yes, this is the game where we finally are introduced to Yoshi, although I should say the Yoshis, as clearly that's the name of the species. It's a bit weird because we know Yoshi, but there's all these different coloured versions and they're apparently all called Yoshi, so it must be the species. Anyway, let's move on. On a side note, there is a misconception that Yoshi had been seen in the Mario & Yoshi puzzle game on the NES prior to this. However, that game was actually released a year later than this one. It was just that the Nintendo Entertainment System still had a bit of life in it, so games were still being released for it. My experience with Super Mario World when it was released was kind of a dud, in that I didn't have it. I had a Super Nintendo, but I actually bought the later batches of it. Couldn't afford it when it first came out. So I got it later for my birthday, and I actually got it with Super Mario All-Stars. Way I saw it, I was getting 4 or 5 games instead of 1, so it was a sweet deal. I did get to play Super Mario World later on, actually renting a copy of it from Blockbusters. There's a blast from the past for you. And I enjoyed it, although having gotten into the other Mario games, I did find the slight differences in the animation a little bit jarring, but nothing too much. It was still a very enjoyable game. At the time though, because renting a game from Blockbuster cost a lot of money, I didn't have the game long enough to be able to play it through to completion. I only got to play it for a matter of about 3 or 4 days, and I genuinely enjoyed it, but once I brought it back, I had other games to be renting instead. It wasn't until years later that I really got to explore this game fully. But that's by the by. How was this game received by everyone else when it was released at the time? Well, if I said highly, I would be dramatically understating it. I couldn't find a single score that wasn't the equivalent of 90% or higher. In fact, that one is only because it rates it as 9 out of 10. Most of the others rate it as 94, 96%. And I actually found 2 separate different sites that rate it as 10 out of 10. I generally don't know that many games can be rated 10 out of 10. However, I think I have actually done that once before, so I ain't going to be critical. And considering the game won Game of the Year for Nintendo Power and Power Play, it must have been pretty damn good. Worldwide, it sold 20.61 million copies, making it the best-selling SNES game of all time. What I'm not entirely clear of on that, however, is whether that factors in copies that were actually sold with the console. If the figures I found include those numbers, it kind of skews them a little bit too much for my liking. One of the biggest positives that people took for this game were the graphics and presentation, and there is no denying it is a beautiful game. However, there was some debate as to whether the game actually realised the truest potential of the 16-bit SNES. However, I have got some differing opinions on that one. You see, some people had referenced the fact that yes, this was the most beautiful Mario game we've ever seen, and hence why it deserves a score in the high 90s, but it was also the first one we'd ever seen on a 16-bit console, so perhaps being used to an 8-bit console kind of swayed people a little bit. I wonder what people would have thought if Super Mario All-Stars had already been released. It's a game that, in my opinion, is far more beautiful graphically. And looking at it from the other side, where people were slightly critical that it didn't take advantage of the SNES's full potential, it was literally one of the first games released with the SNES, so how could it be expected to release its full potential when its full potential was still being explored? That's kind of a silly criticism for me, so I'm gonna take both sides on that one. Many critics praised the game's diversity across the levels and the different types of gameplay functions, secrets and bonuses, just giving the game so much longevity, and I can 100% agree with that. However, one other comment made by Electronic Gaming Monthly was that they really appreciated that the game didn't rehash elements from Super Mario Bros. 3, and I just don't think that's remotely true. There are numerous aspects in this game that seem to be lifted or enhanced from Super Mario Bros. 3. I actually don't think that's a criticism, by the way. There is nothing wrong with that. If there are really good parts of a game, you want to keep them. But to say that it doesn't take anything from a previous game, it clearly does, and I just don't accept that. The game's audio has also been universally praised even back when it was first released, and continues to be praised now, and I can't dispute that. The music in this game, whilst not quite as iconic as the original Super Mario Bros. Music, is still stunning, and all the sound effects stand up perfectly. Even looking back now, this is a game that is pretty much always on big lists of greatest games of all time. Yes, if an individual person gives their top 10, it probably ain't going to make it onto most of them. But when magazines and companies do their top 100s, majority of times you're going to find this game on it, and probably understandably so. But how does this game hold up to modern scrutiny? Well look, first of all I have to say, and I've said this before, I don't think platform games, 2D platform games at least, ever got better than they were on the Super Nintendo. They just seem to peak here. And don't get me wrong, there have been plenty of platform games done in this 2D format that have been as good as these, but I don't think they ever took steps beyond. Graphically, some of the new Super Mario Bros. Games and stuff will have lots more bells and whistles, but realistically, gameplay-wise, they're not going to have improved that much. And that's not a criticism, it's because the 16-bit SNES was really where platform games just thrived. There wasn't really much to improve on, and Super Mario World is a perfect example of that. It didn't really matter what type of gamer you were. If you didn't have a lot of free time, it was easy to pick this game up, just do one level, and then get back on with your life. If you wanted to sink hours into a game, explore every single nook and cranny, find every single secret, this game had you covered and would keep you occupied for a very long time. Going back to it now, I discovered loads of elements that I hadn't known of when I first rented the game for those first few days. And even as I still play it now, there's always something new, some new little secret that I find out about the game. The game's been re-released multiple times, most notably as Super Mario Advance 2, which I'll cover in a later review. But the reason it's been re-released on different consoles so many times is because of just how damn successful and enjoyable the game is. As for pop culture, whilst the game isn't quite as ingrained in the psyche as the original Super Mario Bros. Was, all you have to do is look to Yoshi. That one character that came from this game is maybe as iconic as any other character in Mario franchise, bar Mario himself. I do have one slight criticism of how this game is looked at, and I touched on it earlier. The fact that this game was the first Mario game to be seen in 16-bit really reflects on it favourably. What I mean by that is, I think if Super Mario All-Stars had been released before this one, I don't think this game would have had anywhere near the impact that it did. I think an argument could be made that taking Super Mario Bros. 3 from Super Mario All-Stars, you could put it up against this game and have a genuine debate as to which one's better. But that's hardly a criticism of this game. The fact that it can even be mentioned in the same breath as Super Mario Bros. 3, and that the argument can be made this is the better one in fairness, tells you just how good this game still is now. If I'm going to go back and play a Mario game, and especially if I want to play with a second player, where we can explore the maps together and start to chip away at the game, it's going to be a tough call which one to play as. They are both two of the best Mario games ever made, and that makes them two of the best games ever made. In the end, if you're a fan of 2D platform games, this game is going to be just as fun to play now as it was when it was released. The fact that graphics have moved on, I don't think really changes anything for this type of game, because there's not really anything you could have done to improve the graphics for this style of animation. So, overall, the easy answer is, it stands up as well as it did at the time, as long as it's the type of game you like. This is not a game that I have that same retro connection to, because apart from those 3 or 4 days, I didn't play it until many years later. That said, over the years, I've come to really enjoy this game. For me, this game gets 9 out of 10, which is the same score I gave Super Mario All-Stars. I think the two games side by side, they're as good as each other, and that is damn high praise. I do want to give a quick apology if my voice has sounded a little bit off for this video. I am currently fighting off some cold and flu symptoms and feeling a little bit sorry for myself, so I hope it hasn't ruined the quality of the video too much. Hopefully you've still been able to enjoy it. Thanks for everyone who's watched. Please put a like on the video if you enjoyed it, comment below what you think of Super Mario World, and until next time, take the high ground.